Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining another episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. We have another very special guest. Before we introduce our guest, we do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact's giving away hundreds of millions of dollars to public education in the form of a free gift. So if your district needs unrestricted funds, reach out to Ideal Impact. Okay, we have another doctor with us today. We have Dr. Perez, former superintendent at Kingsville ISD. Dr. Perez, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And just so our listeners get to know you a little bit, we have a lot of listeners. We have over 1,000 listeners a month. It's very exciting. And I'm sure we have a lot of superintendents. If you don't mind, share a little bit about your background and kind of what brought you to where you're at today.
Well, I've been a principal. I've been in education for 38 years. I've been a principal in all levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. And then I was assistant superintendent before I became superintendent. And I have always served in schools or school districts that serve the high populations of poverty-stricken students or special needs students. And so we've been able to, our teams have been able to, when I get there, I like to find out who the team is and try to bring out the best of them and best in them. And we've been able to turn around every school and district that, had been a part of. Now, Kingsville ISD is my hometown, and I live in Corpus Christi, but I wanted to go to Kingsville because they had about 11 to 12 superintendents within 10 years. So they had a revolving door of superintendents. So I wanted to go and try to give them some sort of consistency and start, implementing some programs that they didn't have. And so I pretty much laid the foundation. There's still a lot more work that needs to get done. And I think that the next superintendent will be able to capitalize on some of the things that we did that are lagging indicators. They won't really show until probably next year or the year after, the way the Texas education system works with testing and accountability.
Got it. Got it. And let's talk about, what are you passionate about in public ed these days? I mean, it seems like topics are always changing in public ed. What's on your radar these days?
Well, I love advocating for public schools and testing and accountability here in Texas. Are you from Texas?
I am. I am.
Yes, okay. So then you're familiar with the fact that we just finished the 89th legislative session, and there was a lot of talk this time about testing and accountability. Well, in 2023, when the Commissioner of Education was changing the way that they were going to do the rules for testing and accountability, we were the first district to pursue a lawsuit to stop them from changing the rules in the middle of the game because they were changing the rules in March of that year. And we were all playing by the rules that were rolled out at the beginning of the year, which we should have been. And so we were taken by surprise. And during that time, there were about 236 superintendents. We sent a letter to the commissioner and to the governor asking them to take a pause, not change the rules, and not change the timelines, and just stick with the rules that were laid out at the beginning of the year. And give us a whole harmless year once they do change the rules, like they had been every 5 years. But we didn't hear any response from the commissioner. And then we all reached out to our legislators. And so 55 legislators, both Republicans and Democrats, they sent a letter to the commissioner also asking, take a pause. Let's hold the districts harmless like you've done every other year while you're changing the rules. And they didn't hear any response from the commissioner. And then when it was getting really very close to when they were going to release the ratings, which would have been a false narrative because they were changing the rules, and it would have made districts look like they were declining or failing, when in fact, had they kept the same rules, not as many districts would have been failing or declining. I asked my representative if he could send one last letter to the commissioner asking, take a pause. Again, same thing, never heard from him. And our last resort was I asked our attorney, we know that what is happening is not fair. Can you find out if there's something illegal about this or unlawful? And he did. 39.032, I believe, was the Texas Education Code that was being violated. And so we pursued a lawsuit. And So we were the first, and then there were 5 other districts that joined us. There were small districts that were part of the law firm that we were using. And then before long, we had 121 school districts joining us. And large and small, we're talking about Dallas, Fort Worth, Brownsville, El Paso, Corpus Christi, and then a bunch of small ones as well. That all those districts, we ended up representing 2.6 million students in the state of Texas.
And
So I've been very busy with that.
that was in 2023.
That was in 2023 during the 88th legislative session. And what we found out was, because our biggest question was why would the commissioner be changing the rules? Because it's going to make public schools look like we're failing or declining. And just within that time, we found out, oh, they're trying to push vouchers. Okay. Also,
Hmm.
coincidentally, that
Interesting.
vouchers, are trying to be passed. And so it was very important that we made sure that, if people think that we're failing or declining, then it's going to be easier for them to pass the vouchers, right?
Yeah.
So, thankfully during that session, we won our lawsuit. The Travis County judge ruled in our favor, the hearing. And also, they did not pass vouchers. Well, come the 89th legislative session, TA, did appeal it to the 15th Court of Appeals. And the 15th Court of Appeals was created within the past couple of years by Governor Abbott. And the 3 judges on there are appointed by Governor Abbott. And so they overturned what the Travis County judge had ruled, and they did release the ratings. And sure enough, it caused a panic. People were thinking, all these schools are failing and, declining when, you know, the standards had been changed. The rules of the games had been changed. And it was from 2 years ago. So it was very difficult to try to explain that. But vouchers did
So,
end up passing. And it just so happened that the day that they were going to vote, I believe the House was voting on vouchers, is the day they released the ratings. So.
so is it safe to say in 2023, there was probably a dip in test scores because of the changes that were happening? Is
Oh,
that
absolutely. Yes. And since then, there's been a lot happening that a lot of things that have been discovered about the accountability system. The next year in 2024, they used an automated system to grade or to score the assessments. And like I believe Dallas, 400 of their tests were graded incorrectly. There's a lot of information on the internet about all of this. There's also a recent study that was done by a student and I have that information, I can pull that up. And it's on Yahoo as well, that the reading scores, they were masked. The improvements were masked because they kept changing the way that they were using the cut score. So this is particularly um,
Sorry, we had a little bit of a had a little bit of an internet glitch there the
okay,
last 20 seconds. So
okay,
you mentioned Dallas and then it kind of started getting
yeah.
choppy.
So Dallas is just one example of, I believe they had about 400 rescores submitted and found that most of them had not been scored correctly by the new automated system by TEA. So that was a concern. And then there was a study that was just recently released that also talked about and I think I have it with me, that also talked about the fact that because the scores are being graded a little bit differently, then it's looking like it's like creating a false narrative about are the kids really are the kids really not improving, or is there something about what's being presented that's not presented correctly?
So with the change in test scores, sorry, the change in the standards that affect the test scores. And by the way, did they stick with that for 2024 or did they change it back to where it was? Or maybe I missed that piece.
No, in 2024, they stuck with the same rules that they had changed.
Okay, okay.
Uh-huh.
So they changed the rules, which creates a dip in scores, which enables them to more easily pass the voucher program. How do those people responsible for the voucher program and getting that passed, how do they benefit from is there a way they benefit by vouchers versus just public education?
Well, the thing is that it's very profitable to privatize public education. Um, and so there's a lot of donors, that are invested in this. And so it's like I said, you have to consider the fact that there's a lot of money invested in this. Also, the STAR test. Chairman Buckley did a very good job in trying to um, kind of eliminate the STAR test because it is not a reliable or valid test. It has not been considered to be valid because it hasn't been tested by an objective outside entity, which is what the law requires. So there's a lot about that. You'll see that in an Austin CBS News coverage. I believe her name was Abigail Velez. She talked about how she showed actual and a picture about how the schools who received an F and the schools that received an A, where their locations were. And you can see a photo of it that shows right down I-35, all the schools that got an F are on the east side, and all the schools that got an A are on the west side. And that was a very telling photo about, the inequity of this test. And so I'm very passionate about making sure that we are um, testing our students in a way that um, is fair and equitable, no matter where the students come from. So I don't know if you can see this picture, but it's a picture, and I can send it to you.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a
kind of
picture of the news coverage from, her name was Abigail Velez from CBS Austin, and she did a really telling study about all the schools who got A's and all the schools who got F's in Austin ISD. And it's just a stark reminder that poverty-stricken students are really not getting a fair shake on this test. And that's very important that we do. So the House, this legislative session, um, the House committee with Chairman Buckley worked very closely with small group of superintendents on reforming the testing accountability system. And, we talked about doing more norm reference testing, doing small tests throughout the year, like 3 tests, to where you'd be able to see, are the students growing? And the test wouldn't be a full day test. There would be a limit onto how long the test would be. And it would measure, growth. Also, there wouldn't be the sorry, the uh, it's my grandson. Also, the rules would not be able to be changed after the school year. All the rules would have to be rolled out before the school year begins. So all that was great, and the House actually voted 143-1. They passed House Bill 4. Went to the Senate. Senate had their own version of House Bill 4, which they did not want to get rid of the STAR test. And the STAR test, TEA pays the STAR vendors at least 388 million. The last report in 2021 was 388 million. And so there's a lot of money involved in that. And so they stuck with wanting to keep the STAR. It went to committee. And so that's when you get 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and then they kind of determine whether they're going to continue with this version or not. And the House version was very fair. It was holding TA accountable, and it was holding the districts accountable. And
quick to just kind of follow up on a couple things. So the first thing is the inequity between the two sides of the highway there, right? Um,
Mhm.
so would you say the solution to that would be different tests, or was it the grading system, or
Both, both.
okay.
And, some questions on the test, they need to see how how our students from economically disadvantaged and from special education, how are they faring compared to the more affluent students? There's a reason that you see the discrepancy in those scores. And I think even the senators who were not in favor of the House Bill 4 version, they even agreed that it's this test and the accountability system is not I guess the students who are in economically disadvantaged situations are the ones who are probably hurt more from this system than anyone. And so they all admit that. So I'm just hoping that the next legislative session that there will be more emphasis on this and be able to come to some sort of consensus and do what's best for the children of the whole state, especially the students in poverty.
And, and just so I understand, and I grew up in an economically disadvantaged area myself. And just so I understand, so the economically disadvantaged area, is it the perception that maybe the best teachers aren't there because they don't have the funding to hire the best teachers, or is it more the parents aren't as active in the lives of the students? I mean, what's causing that disparity? Because it just seems like if everyone had the same test score, you'd have an even benchmark. But I understand like there's different, I understand the equity discussion as well.
Mhm.
Just kind of
So,
curious what's causing it. Yep.
mhm. Okay, so many of us were economically disadvantaged growing up, right? But we had the parents that at least ensured that we did our due diligence to make sure we're doing our homework, doing our work, right? So
Mhm.
you can be economically disadvantaged and still be able to achieve things for sure. But, when you get children that are under CPS care, that are in foster care, that are being moved from here to here to here, they don't have the experiences that some of our more affluent students would have. So if they ask them a question about cornhole, okay, playing cornhole, many of our economically disadvantaged students wouldn't even know what that's about, what that
Interesting.
is, or a snow blower, many of our students wouldn't even know what that is. So there's some things that, those who have the experiences of going on cruises and, all sorts of trips, they get those real life experiences, or they're at home with their laptop. They're very familiar with it. They were digital natives. They've been using the laptop or the iPad, since they were, as
Right.
soon as they could touch it, right? Many of our other students, there's no way they even had a laptop. So like third graders, they have to use a drop-down menu. They have to use all sorts of tools. I mean, think about when we were in school, many of us didn't even learn to type until we were like, in high school. We had our typing class. This is going way back with me. But so it's the experiences of that. So one of the things that came up in the lawsuit hearing from our attorney was, are we testing the students on their knowledge, or are we testing the students on how well they can type and how well they can maneuver, the typing system? So we need to look at that as well. Yes, there's a teacher shortage, but the teacher shortage is everywhere. And the harder districts to work at are the ones that you have to welcome every child. You can't exclude anybody. So there's a lot of charter schools that they don't have to accept everyone. If there's severe special needs, they don't have to accept them if they don't have those services. If they're behavioral students, they don't have to accept them, or they can just remove them, withdraw them, and they have to go back to their public school. So we have to look at the populations and the constraints that some of these school districts have and make sure that we're providing those districts as much support as possible, because don't have the luxury of just being able to kind of cherry pick. Nor would we want to. We want to make sure we educate every child. But a lot of times when they compare private schools or charter schools, they're not saying, oh, but they get to choose who their clientele is, who are their
Yeah.
students. That gets left out quite a bit.
Yeah, and the way you describe that, I would say is one of the best ways to phrase that when it comes to the equity discussion. And I haven't heard that before as far as the test score, not the scores, but the structure of the test and the experiences of the different demographics and students.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense, especially if they're referencing things that, certain, groups of people may not have experienced before.
Right. Through no fault
Um,
of their own, they just haven't.
yeah, yeah, and it's not really a measure of intelligence. It's
Mhm.
just you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right, right.
Um, and I know we're running short on time. Last question here. You mentioned TA and the funding of the test agency, or the vendors, or whatever you want. What what's that look like exactly? Because I'm picturing a third party that creates these tests and does a lot of research to develop the test. And I mean, what am I missing there? Is it I know there's more to it. I'm just kind of,
Mhm.
you
Well, I
know.
mean, you pay the vendor to create the tests, you pay the vendor to create the prep materials, you pay the vendor to score the tests. That's a lot of money. And if, you're trying to change that, that's a lot of money for businesses to lose. So even some of the grants that we can apply for, um, they're requiring us to use certain vendors. So we've got to make sure that we're following the money, we're vetting everything as carefully as possible, and that we're asking the question, why would you want school districts to look like they're failing? Why would you change the rules right now in the middle of the game? Why would you not do what you've been doing in previous years, where every so many years you do have to change the test according to law? You have to, refine it, but they've always given districts 1 to 2 years of hold harmless, so we can make sure that we're aligning the curriculum, that we're getting the resources, that we're vetting everything, we're training our teachers, and preparing our students in time to be able to do this. I mean, we've been holding school districts accountable for what, about 40 years or something, and no time has there been a challenge to the way it's been done. And that's because it was being done as fairly as possible, I guess you could say, in reference to, okay, let's have time to prepare for this test. That was one of the biggest contentions about this. But then we started digging deeper and about, well, let's look at the questions and the way they're being asked, and are there other reasons why students from, lower socioeconomic status um, districts are doing more poorly than the other students. And so it just kind of opened up some questions. And I think for the benefit of districts and communities, the cities and the communities need to know this, because a lot of times all people look at is a letter grade. Well, if we ask anyone, did you get straight A's throughout your elementary, middle school, high school, and college years? If you didn't, does that make you any less of a person? Or were there other things you were good at that weren't shown on this letter grade on this report card? So I think it's real important that we look at how are we holding everyone accountable.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely paints the picture of a more complex issue. Um, and then on the funding side, it's also interesting because you always hear about, additional funding needed for teacher salaries and for districts, but then it sounds like there's a big pool of funding being circulated at different levels that, maybe aren't reaching the districts, but is readily available for other things. Is that a fair statement, or?
Mhm. And then when it comes to vouchers, the $1 billion that or $1 million that was assigned to vouchers, um, we just want the private schools to be held to the same test as our public schools. And why aren't they?
Yeah.
If it's not good enough for privates, why is it, being used for public schools? Then we might be able to get another picture. But then also, are the private schools required to take every child like public schools are? Not necessarily, you know.
Last question here. For those that want to get involved in this discussion on a government level, if you will, right? How would they go about doing that? How can people get their perspective out there on the topic? Um,
Well, they're welcome to email me and I can point them into the right direction as well. But also through TASA, advocacy. They're very good. We've got a lot of associations, the Texas Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents also, South Texas Association of Schools. We've got several associations that are kind of joining together. But there were several superintendents that got together. Myself, Justin Terry from Forney, Stephanie Elizalde from Dallas, um, oh gosh, Brad Ernos from Cushing. So there was a small group, like about 8 of us, that got together. Dee Carney, she works for Strive now. It used to be Hilco. So there were several avenues that you can get involved in. But please feel free to email me at sissy.perez@yahoo.com, and sissy with CISSY dot Perez, PEREZ at yahoo.com. Welcome to email me, and then depending on where you're located at, I would love to continue you with the discussion and put you in contact. Raise Your Hand Texas was very helpful also. Definitely helpful in helping us testify. Many of us testified on House Bill 4. And like I said, we hope this will continue. And if Chairman Buckley is your public education representative from the House, contact him, and of course the ones from the Senate side as well.
Awesome. No, this is great. I really appreciate your time today because this is a unique discussion. This is something different we've talked about in the past, and it's definitely something we need to be aware of. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you too.
Yep. Nice meeting you as well, Dr. Perez. And for those that have been tuning in, stay tuned for future episodes. Before we close out, we do want to give one final shout out to our sponsor, Ideal Impact. If your district needs funding, reach out to Ideal Impact. They have hundreds of millions of dollars for giving away to public education in the form of a free gift. So reach out to Ideal Impact. And for those that have been tuning in, stay tuned for future episodes of the Educational Leadership Podcast.